And now we are excited to welcome Amy Hollaman and Crystal Wright as they will present a deep dive into all things that go into operating Halloween attractions. So please welcome them to our stream. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hi, thank you.
Hi guys, I just want to thank you guys for coming and talking to us again today. Now, I guess before we get more into the operational side of things, you want to give me a bit of your background and how you kind of got into the haunt industry, what you did before you were working in the haunt industry, and kind of how that played into what you do now.
Okay, well, my name's Amy Hollaman, and I started haunted houses, not officially in the professional industry, when I was a kid. My parents and their friends used to have small dinner parties, and my brother and all the children of these parents, we would make a haunted house in the basement. And it started around Halloween, but slowly this crept into all the parties that happened. We eventually started charging like $1 for people to come to the basement so we'd have money to purchase things like dry ice. So my passion for Halloween started when I was a little kid. And then I grew up doing a lot of theater as well as music, and was an actress myself in my growing up ages. And then I moved to the city of Philadelphia, and I was working for an AmeriCorps program, and I needed some extra cash. And the year prior, I'd been to an amazing Halloween event called Terror Behind the Walls at Eastern State Penitentiary. So I auditioned. I got an acting job over, I guess, about 13 years. I worked there first seasonally and eventually full time, starting as an actress, scaring people left and right, learning the ins and outs. Then I managed the green room. Then I became the show manager. Then I became the creative director and one of the general managers. So that's one of the largest scale haunted houses in the country outside of major theme parks. Mm-hmm. After that, I had the pleasure of working with Epic Entertainment Group, who I think was just on before us, Steve and Charity. And I worked as the production manager at Queen Mary's Dark Harbor, right over there in Long Beach, which I wish I was there now for Midsummer. But this is awesome that this is happening. And now I actually got approached while I was in California to work for Midsummer Scream. So I'm the front of house operations manager. I started last year helping run the lines out front. We think we definitely improved things last year, but still have more plans in place for 2021 because it's going to be a bigger and better show than ever. So we'll be ready, get you in there, get you screaming and buying cool, spooky stuff. And my current year-round role, I work for 13th Floor Entertainment Group, and we have about 15 haunted houses all over the country, including Los Angeles Haunted Hayride. And I'm the general manager of 13th Floor Haunted House in Denver, Colorado. So that's my haunt background.
That's awesome. Very experienced. And what about you, Crystal?
Hi, thank you again for having us today. This is very exciting. My haunt background also starts on the East Coast. In about 2008, I believe, I started as a haunt actor for a scare house based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I worked for them for, I believe, 2 years as an actor and then moved up to a haunt manager. Did that for, I believe, a season or two. And then I was made the manager of the basement, which was the interactive, immersive experience that we offered for quite a while. I did that for, I believe, about 2 years as well. And then I was able to eventually become the full-time director of operations for them for about 2 years. So pretty much in charge of everything from the time we closed down from the season to the time when we opened up for the season again. We moved to the West Coast in 2019 now, I believe, the beginning of the year, 2018 actually. 2018, I moved to the West Coast and started doing some consulting work for Into the Dark, which is a production company based in San Francisco. I currently help them with their operations and haunt actor training. It's been a great experience working with them. They're a great crew. Very excited to be here on the Best Coast with Midsummer Scream happening and helping out with this. Outside of haunting, I have a lot of experience with customer service and project management, which both of those are very, very important skills for trying to keep your operations in line.
Oh, and one thing, Elizabeth, I know Crystal and I wanted to mention just for our conversation, the pronouns that I use is she, her, and hers.
Okay.
And I use the same, she and her.
Okay. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I am also a she, her, and hers.
Great.
Yeah, so I guess going from your background, what is more of your day-to-day role looking like? Like, what would you say that throughout the year? Also, how does it change depending on whether, because obviously the haunt industry is a little more seasonal, so how does it go throughout the years? And,
I'll go first, and then we can take turns if you want to go first sometimes too, because we'll probably have some similar things to share.
Probably, yeah.
So, and as far as year-round goes, planning for operations, of course, you're getting ready for October, or for a lot of haunts, it's mid-September, really, when we get started with our actual operations. But I think it's very important for the operations leadership to work closely with the creative team and with the production team. So a lot of my responsibilities in the off season are actually overseeing the operation of the build. So making sure that we're on time with what were our ideas, our brainstorming, how we're putting those into fruition, how we're actually putting things into a build. I also spend a lot of time doing purchasing and sourcing of items, not just buying expensive things, but also going to thrift stores, stopping when I notice something really cool on the side of the street, going to neighbors and being like, oh, you guys are going to throw out all this really cool old looking wood. This is perfect for our shack, and looking into things like that. And then of course there's, a lot of time making sure we have our proper licensing, inspections, everything up to date and staying within our health and safety codes. And then hiring. I mean, that's a big part of structuring, making the team, and overseeing that process and getting everybody ready and trained for the show. So it's definitely a year-round job. And a lot of planning goes into what happens during September, October, even beginning of November. It's a lot of work, but it's all worth it when you see people come through screaming, laughing, and saying like, that was so cool. It makes you think like, great, those hours sitting at my desk looking Excel sheets was worth it.
I think Amy covered it all there. The only thing I would add in is that it does also require a lot of documentation. So putting together your guides for how you do things, your process, your procedure, your safety manuals, your training materials. Operations is really all about sort of getting those aligned and then getting them written down. I think that's a key point that sometimes get lost because it's not the exciting work, right? It's not the really flashy stuff. You generally don't get a chance to speak too much on panels about writing things down, but it's really important and crucial to running a really smooth operation is having expectations in writing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Kind of going off that, how do you guys deal with when design wants something, or if they're trying to do something crazy versus operations? Like, how do you deal with balancing those two things? Because I know they can go hand in hand, but they can also sometimes butt heads a little more.
Yeah. Amy, do you mind if I take this one first?
Go for it.
All right. I've been thinking a lot about this one because I had previously been nicknamed the Dream Killer, and that was a little hard when I was told that later. But it is an important role, and I think a lot of the lessons I've learned I really want to share with folks. I think it's important to really let your creative teams go in the moment as much as possible. Let them get those ideas out, express themselves. And what I've found as I've learned and grown in the role is that if you let people go, eventually they kind of come back around to that operations side and they understand that, okay, maybe we can't have an actor that's hanging from the ceiling that needs to fly over the customers, 300 times a night. Like, that's just not going to work. So maybe we can think of a better way to do it that's safe for the actor and that's still a great experience. So I think it's important, number one, to let your, creative teams really go with the flow and only reel them back in when, they've definitely gone too far up into la la land, and then maybe even a day or two later. So kind of let them think about it, let them process, let them get those thoughts out. And only, if it's gone on too long, you really kind of try to pull them back in. I would say it's really important. And then number two is to kind of when you do bring it up, if you have to bring it up in the moment, say they're really going out there and they're talking about like fire cannons and stuff, which would be a major no-no, just sort of, gently kind of bringing in, how do you, how do you plan to execute that safely? And just sort of just not saying, oh my gosh, we can't do that. That's totally unsafe. What are you thinking? But just sort of gently reminding them that there are some parameters we do have to work in.
Yeah, of course. I'll piggyback off of that. And anyone who's ever worked with me or seen any of my panels knows I always say safety is always number one, most important thing. I think something that's important, and I know a lot of people in haunted house operations, and I don't want to speak for you, Crystal, but I think you'd say this. We also are creative. I'm not like just paint it black and move forward. Like we're also creative. So we can feel the same desire that a lot of the artists we work with to say, let's make this wall look like it is from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Not only is there rust, but there's moss that's been building up on it. And when you have the proper time budgeted for that type of labor, you can do it. But operations often, I feel like, has to bring in a perspective also of the guest, because we as haunters can design for one another, because we know, like, I can't wait so when my friend Doug sees how this pipe looks perfectly rusty, right? But the guest is only going to see it for half a second. So sometimes I use that perspective when I'm working with my production teams to remind them, like, if they need to move on to the next project due to budget, that I know you could make this even rustier than ever. And everyone will believe it's the rustiest pipe that was ever found. However, if the next room looks like nothing, it won't matter how rusty this pipe is, So I think it's helping give that perspective, and also telling them that you understand. Because sure, like, you could be called a dream killer, but you have to say, like, remind them why we're doing this. Like, we're doing this for the fans, and they do also want to see a chainsaw and lots of blood in the next room. So let's not disappoint them. So bringing it back to why we do it in the first place, which is so people can have a great time during Halloween.
Yeah, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yes, well said.
So going off that, you mentioned the whole creativity side. Does that mean that you also have like tips where they might say, oh, I want this, and they're like, okay, I know that we can do something similar, but it's going to be a lot cheaper and it's actually going to be a lot more effective, or it might be sturdier? It's just, do you have like a whole catalog of?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'll just use a simple example and then toss it to you, Crystal. But let's see. So when I'm speaking today, I'm talking about various experiences and various attractions I've worked in. But I have seen a really amazing work done by an artist where he made a wall look like it was all real brick, taking it from drywall to building out with compound, painting it, etching every single brick into a wall. It looks sick. It took a ton of time. I've also worked with production artists who you can go to Home Depot and buy a brick panel that's like $40, install it, still take time detailing it, but nowhere near the same level of work. So you save time and money. And you can always, if you have time before your season open, go back and enhance that brick panel. But there are certainly workarounds. I think the longer you're in the industry and working closely with artists, that you learn, like, we don't have to build every single brick, literally. Like, we can just go buy a panel. And again, to the guest, the very educated haunt fan, which there's a lot of them out there, they might know, like, oh, that brick panel is from Home Depot. That's not real brick. But guess what? If our actors are doing a great job and bam, the scare comes from over here and the lighting effect, they shouldn't even be thinking about where that brick came from, because they should be so immersed in the experience with the efforts of both the artists who built it, the actors who are doing it, and ideally the operators who are pulsing it correctly, that savings is worth it in the end.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say, as an operations person, someone that's really interested in this, when I'm networking, when I'm at events like Midsummer Scream, the other conventions, I'm talking to other artists. And if I'm looking at haunts, I'm looking at what they're doing, and I'm looking for those shortcuts, those tricks, and I'm paying attention to that to bring it back to my artists and share with them as well. They're hopefully all doing the same, but I think it's helpful to have as many eyes out there as possible and looking for those things. So I would say that's actually part of the job, is to look for those kind of creative tricks that you can share with your team to make their jobs a little bit easier and they can have, fun where they want to instead of building a wall literally brick by brick.
Yeah, so also going with the whole guest experience thing, how do you guys design to maintain also the high throughput and kind of make sure people keep moving, you can get high volumes of people through, certain elements that people can touch are built for like wear and tear? How do you make sure that all those are incorporated into the design, or how do you go about thinking about that?
That's a big
one. I can go first. If you want.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I love numbers and math. So my approach to operations is very mathematical. So, it comes down to thinking about, like, for example, like the amount of linear square footage you have in your show. And if you want a group of choosing an ideal group size. So let's say your ideal group size is 4 or 6. That's sort of a lot of average haunted houses would say like 6, right? And then you say, okay, I want to make sure this group is in this room, but not entering the next room until the other group moves forward. It's kind of thinking like a roller coaster. So if you were putting cars in a roller coaster, how many could you put on the track? And then you're kind of backing up and saying, okay, if that's the case, and we're going to be open for 4 hours, and I know I can put in 36 groups at one moment, you back up and you do the math to think about how many tickets you can realistically sell without overselling the show. Then so that's the math part of it, right? And then, of course, up front, you're going to have, I know the term, at least I heard a lot in SoCal, was pulsing, the pulser. I know on the East Coast, sometimes we call them line beasts, but it's a person who is sending people into the attraction. When you're actually footsteps on the doorstep going in for the first scare, that person has to use the timing that was done with the math that you did. So often you can buy controllers from places like Fright Props, or that you can put a timer on there, or you can make it yourself where a light goes off and that pulser knows, okay, it's this many seconds have gone past, I'm sending in the next group. When you get people who are guessing, I think it's about this time, that can be problematic to throughput. So I believe in a mathematical system. Now you're going to say, sure, Amy, my haunted house did that. My home haunt, my professional haunt did that, but still Congo lines formed. Ooh, Congo lines. Okay. It's very difficult to never have them. So the next step is operations working with the creative and build team to ensure that everyone is getting scared forward. Right. So if animation, if you have an animatronic or animation and you only want people in that room for about 8 seconds, program it to be 3 seconds so that they see it. They can continue walking past it. If you program a 30-second show, like I worked in one show that had a guy that touched a zombie. He touched electrical wire and he got shocked. That lasted for about 30 seconds. And it was the very end of the show. And it was really cool to watch. So everyone stopped and watched it. And then the next group backed up into them. And then that whole cool effect wasn't as cool because you just heard the whole thing happen and you saw half of it. And so we had to shorten that program to work with the timing. And so you think about the lights. You don't want someone to have to stare backwards. You want the actors to know, okay, they got startled by this sound that's been triggered. Now I hit the 4th person in the group to propel them walking forward. So it's coordinating both the actors, the things that you're building into the math that you've done. And that's how you can really maintain a high throughput haunted house. And then I'd say, oh, geez, I'm going on and on. But
it's all very interesting.
Okay. Observation. So I'm sure Crystal's been there too. You can make an awesome plan that you think this is totally going to work. Then your variable shows up. Humans. Okay. Humans, you can't control them like a roller coaster, right? So then you find out everyone turns to the left here instead of the right. Why? And then they get back. Oh, and then they do this. So then once you see that, you have to create a communication method with your team where the actor can tell their attraction lead or their manager, everyone goes to the left here, and that's why it takes them so long to get to my room. The manager needs to relay that to operations, who can relay it to production team. Now, all of a sudden, production team puts like 7 skeletons right where people were turning to the left. Guess what? Now the guests know that's not where I go. I have to turn to the right. So you have to be constantly walking your show during the season, see where backups are occurring, see why. Often there's overzealous actors who they're just so passionate, but they want their moments of fame, and they jump in front of the group and they're being scary and they're being scary. But what they don't realize is that the next group now has already seen that and it won't be impactful. So you have to coach the actor and say, remember when you first were being scary? That was great. But the second and third move, you got to cut that, because otherwise you're not going to get the startle moment of the next group. And it's not because you're not great. It's not because I don't want the guests to see you for, hey, I'd give you an hour-long show if I could. But it's the variety of haunted houses and the different types of scares and the different actors and the different scenes and music that really make the whole thing a thrilling, immersive experience. So, to sum it up, I'd say coordinating the math and operations with everything you do, like throughput has to be thought through every single thing you do. So don't sleep on throughput.
Amy, that was so much. Thank you. I mean, I'm like learning a few things as you're speaking. The only things that I would add in is, when you're making your design, make sure you have the tools that you need and available to you to properly monitor what's happening. I know, I love that mug. Properly monitor what's happening with the throughput. So can you see where the guests are getting stuck? Do you have a bunch of cameras, or do you have peepholes? Do you have enough actor hallways that you can get around and see without, interrupting the experience for the guest? So, working with the design team early on to make sure you have these things in place. And I think we may end up probably talking about that again, because I'm a big, advocate for making sure you have plenty of room for your actors to have actor hallways, cubbies, places for them to be. And then the second thing that the kind of tip that I would get is that if you have the ability with the design to, create places where guests can leapfrog each other. It's a little complicated, but that can be something that can help your throughput, because you are always going to have that human factor, someone who's going a little bit slower and wants to take their time and really enjoy those sets. And you've got that group that's just so terrified they're just running, hopefully not running because that's not safe, but walking very quickly through your attraction. If you have an opportunity to kind of allow them to leapfrog with the design, say like, one of the haunts I worked at had a room of doors where there was a loop hallway. So you could kind of put the slow group in the loop hallway and then put the quick group, through the bypass back on the path. That allowed you to kind of break up that conga line that was forming early on. Part of that works in tandem is making sure that you have good communication and good relationship with your actors. I think Amy and I will probably shout this from the rooftops every chance that we get, is making sure you build those great relationships with them and that you trust the things that they're saying, the experiences they're having, and that they have a good way to communicate back with you all of that information, and you do things with it. So again, like if the guests are all going left and your actor tells you that, you need to do something instead of just say, well, scare them to the right, and this is where, again, if Amy could just coach me for the rest of my life, I would be totally happy. She gives really great advice to the actors on, how to maybe, make their scare a little bit better for the experience that we're trying to provide without, putting them down. So I think, having those ability to observe, having those leapfrog opportunities, and then working on building great relationships with your actors so that you can communicate quickly and easily the issues that you're seeing. Yeah, and I'll add, I think something that's important, I think Crystal and I both at some points in our haunt career acted, and I don't think you have to have acted in order to be great at operations. However, once you get that role, you should get into the show for a night to really understand it. But you could take an operations role knowing a lot about event planning, throughput, concert entry, but you do have to get to know it. And I think that's something I think, Crystal and I both believe in. Part of leadership is getting in on those front lines with your operations and acting staff, like working with the pulsing line beast staff. It is not an easy job, especially if you've had guests who
have been waiting in line for half an hour and they think they should go next, but the pulser knows it's actually the quick passes line turn to go next. These guests are frustrated. Their expectations are building up a lot about what they're about to see. And you are the one thing in between them having a great time and you just standing there. So I have stood side by side or said, hey, let me take a break for a second. Let me show you how I would do it. You don't have to do it exactly like this, and model that. But you have to acknowledge there's every job in the haunt industry can be fun, but none of them are super easy. You know, of course, when you're doing it right and you're experienced, then it's going to become more fun. But I think it's important for all operators to be well versed in understanding what it's like on the actor side of things, what it's like on the build side of things. Recently, I've been doing a lot of building, painting, things at my haunted house that I've never done before, but I'm learning it, and it helps me relate to my team a lot more when telling them how we need to operate.
Yeah, and I would only add in that keep doing it. You know, even if you've done it once that first year, you know, try to get in even 10, 15 minutes of doing it. It's a really great refresher.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, even at my age, I found that working in the customer service industry, working my way up from lifeguard to manager, that, yeah, there's just a wide variety and understanding everything going on and the importance of that. So I agree, that really struck a chord with me. But going off that, how do you make sure that all of your actors are properly trained going into the event or in such a short time? Because obviously everything changes every year. How do you get them up to speed and so that they're prepared to do their jobs?
I'd love to start on this one. So, you know, making sure you put in the time to train people, making sure you put in more time than you think you need. That was definitely a lesson I've learned, I would say, last year with the consulting. I kind of cut back the projected training schedule. I was like, this team's got it. We did this the second year of the show. We don't need as much training. And, you know, as we worked on the show and as it developed, it's a slower throughput, more theatrical show, heavily scripted. And so as we kind of got closer to it, I realized, you know, maybe that wasn't, I made a mistake there. We probably could have used a little bit more training time. So definitely make sure you put in more time than you think you need to train your actors. Work on different types of training and make sure that you accommodate for different learning styles. So whether you have big group trainings with a lot of visual elements and audio elements with, you know, with your just speaking, but you also have it available in writing, and that you have interactive elements as well, so that each kind of learner takes each skill and is able to absorb it, you know, as easily for them. And then always, again, keep that relationship with your actors so that you can constantly give feedback about the experience as you're seeing it. Because I think that, you know, feedback is a gift, but it can sometimes be a challenging gift. So, you know, making sure that, you know, you have that relationship with them and you can let them know that, I think, you know, maybe for this role, we should try this a little bit, and being able to work with them to help train them continuously. And then I would say my last piece of advice would be to kind of rely on your recurring actors. Do everything you can to maintain your cast. Both attractions that I've been heavily involved with have had really excellent retention. They've been able to bring their cast back year after year after year. And I think that really helps as well, because you can almost rely on it like a buddy system where, you know, you can, when you're doing your casting, you can kind of try to pair a more experienced actor either in the same room or near a newer actor, and they can work together to kind of help each other to learn and to, you know, become better actors all around. So really working on keeping your cast is I would say an important part of training. Amy?
Yeah, I think it starts with planning and production and making sure the spaces you're creating for the actors are safe. Even though it might be like make sense for someone to crawl into a tiny hole and then stand up and be in this tiny crouched down spot, like realistically, is that person going to be able to do that for more than an hour, or are they going to start their neck starts to hurt? So thinking about different types of body sizes, heights of people while you're building is important. I've certainly, not recently, but worked in haunted houses where I've gone through and seen a drop panel or a drop down, depending what you call it. One year, there's one that it looked really cool. It's supposed to look like a huge welding box. And we had all this cool stuff to put on the front of it, pieces of old welding boxes to make it look like you wouldn't think there was an actor in there at all. But when I pressed the hinge for it to drop, it was super heavy. And I I said to my tech crew, who, most tech crews are very strong. And I was like, this is not going to be suitable to be done every 30 seconds, even for someone who's strong. Like, can you really imagine doing this every 30 seconds for hours on end? Your arm is going to get fatigued. And like, so how can we make it lighter? Which was a sacrifice a little bit on design, because we had to remove some of those really cool looking components because they were heavy, but it just wasn't safe. And safety has to be the first priority. So starting with your build and planning for safety, and then of course training. So everybody gets a general idea of how to scare people, right? Like when you're a little kid, like I know I used to scare my brother, like, you wait behind the wall until a person has no idea, and then you jump out at them. Right. So it's easy. Training's not needed. No, just kidding. So that's why it's important to create a language with your actors and your management team where they can talk to each other about how to scare properly and safely. So I use my favorite method is the 3S method. So what that means is it's a priority system to teach the actors. The first S is surprise, safety. Not surprise, it's safety. So that means the first number one priority for all acting, all positions is safety, okay? If you don't scare someone, but you're being safe, I'm not going to get mad at you if you told me I couldn't do that, Amy, because it wasn't safe. I'm going to support you. The second S is specialization. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time designing this haunted house. If you jump out behind this wall and just say boo, that's not going to be impressive or impactful. You need to do the role that's been designed for you, to hit this button so the light comes off, to jump in front of them, to jump out behind them, to reach around the corner. That's what I need you to do. That's how this has been designed. That's your special role. You're important. You're unique. You need to stay in that role. Your third S, surprisingly, is scary. Now you're like, what, Amy? It's a haunted house. It's all about scaring people. Yeah. But if you're not being safe, guess what? You're not going to be scaring people next year. So you have to, if you are being safe and staying in your role and doing things properly, you're going to get the scares. You're going to intimidate people. You're going to startle people. You're going to creep people out. So they're saying, what is that girl doing? Is that a human? What is that? Ah! And go run, right? But if you tell me, Amy, it was actually scarier for me to jump up on this wall and jump down in front of her. That's why I knocked over that customer. I'm going to say, hey, let's rewind here. How was your scare designed? Oh, I was supposed to do blah, blah. Were you ever supposed to run up this wall and jump on, potentially land on someone? They're like, I don't think I was. I'm going to be like, what did I say about safety? That's way more important. I know you could, hey, not being safe is really scary. There's lots of things we can do that'll make people scared that aren't safe at all, like, oh, instead of a fake, electrical cracker, why don't we just really cut those electrical cords? That's really scary, right? But that's not safe. And that's not the guest experience you want people to have. So I use the 3S system. And during the season, it's easy for me to talk with the attraction leads to talk with the actors and make sure we're all on the same page. And I think it's an easy way to remember stuff, and occasionally I'll give awards to actors for being safe, and everyone's in the green room at the end of the night. And I'm like, what's the first S? And everyone's like, safety. I'm like, great. Crystal gets an award tonight. Elizabeth gets an award tonight. Sam gets an award tonight because they were all safe, and sort of incentivizing safety, recognizing it.
Yeah. So one factor, obviously, that can kind of hurt safety and also cause just a variable in addition to the typical guests that you get is alcohol, the difference between dry events versus events that sell alcohol. How do you guys plan for the kind of that adding to the variability of people just in general and how everyone stays safe, especially the actors?
Do you want me to go first?
I can start with this one.
Okay, great.
I've worked at events that have been both dry and have had alcohol on site, and It is a tricky thing to balance, right? Because you have the alcohol on site because you're trying to increase revenue, right? So there is a purpose for it, and there's a benefit to people drinking more. But at the end of the day, as Amy says, safety has to come first. So keeping an eye on your guests, the status of the guests, and having a plan in place ahead of time of what you're going to do if a guest does not look like they're safe to go through, and having options. Maybe you ask them to hang out in another room that's very nice, very posh, right? You're not punishing them, but you're just going to have them hang out with some water for maybe an hour, and then you'll see if they can go through maybe later in the night. Or you have a plan where you offer them tickets on another night, right? You have these options ready so that you're not stuck in the moment looking at this person going, what do we do? They are stumbling. They can't go through. Ugh. And I brought up the fact that I've worked in both dry and, events that have sold alcohol, because even you have to be ready for this even if you have a dry event, because it is, people go out and they get their liquid courage, right? They might, especially if you have a place that has like a parking lot off site, there might be some tailgating, before, right before people hop on whatever, they need to get over to your event, or, right before they leave the parking lot to come to your front gate. So you have to be ready in both those situations for guests that might have had a little bit too much to drink to be safe to go through. Amy, I'm sure you have plenty to add.
Mm-hmm. I've worked at both types of events as well. I think one thing I'll say is, as an operator, I've seen both, and I do get concerned about all levels of safety. So I think every event I've worked for has done it the right way. And I'm glad to say that. I think that in addition to revenue stream, alcohol can enhance an experience, obviously, right? Not just because someone's getting intoxicated, but it taps into like a taste sense. So, for example, at Queen Mary's Dark Harbor, the year I worked there, they had a lot of themed cocktails that when you had a cocktail that might have had cotton candy vodka flavor or something, and you're standing outside of the circus and the ringmaster walks by. That's another level of immersion. So there's something to be said for that. Just like having food at an event, that's why there's alcohol available at restaurants as well, right? It's like adding to the experience. Or you go to the theater at intermission, you have a glass of wine. It adds to the experience. It can add to the experience in a classy way. It can also be problematic if people overindulge. So like Crystal said, you have to have plans in place. Of course, you have to have the correct licensing, making sure you're following serve safe standards, everyone's tips trained, whatever's the local authorities training. You can't just go into this blindly. I think the best thing to do, especially if you're starting a haunted house or starting an alcohol program and part of your haunted house, is hiring an experienced bar manager, which I've learned because I've never managed a bar. I've managed operations. I know how to count inventory and everything. But just like any industry, there's tricks and ways to do things better and cheaper for those who are experienced in it. So hire experienced bar manager, and make sure you're not just assigning someone who was a great actor last year but broke their foot to become the bartender. Like, that is not the route you want to take. You need to have experienced professionals. And then I think having security in place and checks, like Crystal said, I think if there's a way, if you have a linear event and there's a way to have option for alcohol at the end and a place to reflect on your experience, I think that's great. But if you have more of a park style event where people are picking and choosing, it's okay for people to have a drink. Like Crystal said, often guests, even if your event is dry, will have a drink before they arrive. It's just being able to have safety and security staff monitoring guests entering, determining if they're safe, and having a plan of what you can offer them. And I think, just knowing too, around Halloween, more people are going to Halloween parties, they're in costumes, and talking to your security team saying, hey, let's remember our goal is to help guests stay safe and to de-escalate situations. We're not sniffing out criminals like, this one was drinking, I knew it. Guess what? There's going to be people who are drinking, but let's be able to determine, do we think they can go through safely, and have a conversation with that person. Hi, we saw that you stumbled a little bit. we're concerned that when you enter this dark, strobe-filled haunted house, that you might fall. We don't want that to happen to you. Can we offer you tickets for another night, like Crystal said? Or could you wait, have some fried dough, wait over here for your friends, and then if you want, I'll let you guys go through again. Whatever the case is, but I think it can certainly enhance an event. I mean, we just, that 13th floor haunted house in Denver for Valentine's Day, we had Love Bites, and there was a ticket bundle where you could buy a ticket with a date, and then you could get a drink afterwards if you were over 21, of course, in our Shriek Easy bar. That's a pretty cool place for people to cool down. Had a themed drink. It was about vampires. Like one was the Slayer's Revenge. And that's something, again, that enhances that person's experience, And then while they're having that drink, they're talking about how cool was that? Or if they have the drink in a park-like atmosphere before going into a haunted house, them having the drink and saying, like, I can't wait to go in there. I bet you there's going to be a character that's called a Slayer, something like that. Just another way to immerse people.
Get that anticipation built up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess kind of as we move in towards the end of the panel, what would you say the biggest lessons that you've learned throughout your time working in the haunted industry have been, and that you wish to, any wisdom you wish to impart on people who are early in their careers starting to know?
I can go first. Okay. I think observation for operations, I think there's lessons all over the place where you can see how people walk, what maybe it's in the grocery store, going to self-checkout. For example, you see some people are very comfortable just walking up and doing it. Some people need a attendant to point which checkout station to go to. And then sort of, I see these things in the everyday world and determine for myself what seems to be more effective. Do people need a staff member to point them in directions? When do they know when they need to do things? So I think taking lessons from the real world and then taking a second to write it down, like don't take pictures of strangers, but if there's something you can take pictures of, great. And thinking about how can I apply that to my own business? So I'd say that's one, is that there's operations solutions everywhere. At the airport, that's like mecca of operations, how they sell tickets, how people get into a reservation system, whether it's Southwest, Delta does it differently, taking these observations and applying those. And I'd say the biggest lesson is also learning from your mistakes and accepting that was okay, but it could be better. One year we had like some critical information we wanted to relay to people before they went through the haunted house about making a choice of interactivity and wearing a glow necklace and what this meant. The first time we did this, we thought the smartest way to do it would be to have a person up on a pedestal in front of a big crowd. We called him the Barker, and he had a megaphone and stuff and was telling everyone this. And we were like, oh, they'll hear it like 6 times at least. It'll be great. It was okay. But the next year, we actually went to an amusement park and saw how they were pulsing people into a roller coaster experience. And we took 2 different types of roller coaster models and realized we need to get people batch them in a smaller group into a room where we can change the lights and effects that draws their attention, and they shut up and they look at this person and they listen. And now not only have they received that information, but they're excited about it, and it is in a theatrical format. That was like the next level of getting that better. I'm sure that could even be better than that, but accepting that that guy barking up there, people like would get up to the place where they had to choose if they need a necklace, and they're like, what's this? So it was okay, but learning how can I make that better? Taking notes from your season and thinking, what are places, where can I be inspired to learn a new method? Or networking with others, talking to other haunters, hiring consultants. Those are all good tips.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to echo looking for inspiration everywhere. I love the podcast 99% Invisible. They look into the hidden ways that design shapes our world. And it is like, it covers a broad range of things. And I think almost every episode you can learn something that is, can be applicable to what we do as haunted attractions, even if it's an episode talking about stoplights, right? And I'm going to actually really expand on Amy's last point, which is networking. I think for any career, this is, anything that you want to do with your life, build those relationships with people, work on networking. You never know when a contact is going to be able to come through. You often hear, if you know someone, you get the job, right? And it kind of sounds like they might be talking about nepotism or something like that. But what it really means is that, when people are working on putting together a team and they know the skill sets that they need, they're going to start in their network and they're going to reach out to the people they know already have those skill sets and start letting them know about the opportunity. And I think that that's huge for being able to develop your career, to develop your skill set, to get new opportunities. I think really working with people and getting to know them, getting to learn about them so that you can call on them later, I think is huge. And maintain those relationships over time. Don't just go to, a networking event where you are doing like speed coffee dates and get someone's info, find them on LinkedIn and then never talk to them again until you're out looking for a job. Make sure you check in with those people, stay active, like what they have to say on LinkedIn, send them a message, send them a comment, really put some time and effort into networking. You never know when you're going to need to connect people or when you're going to need, help from someone. And so maintaining those relationships, I think, is huge.
Yeah. And LinkedIn, I agree. I think LinkedIn is a great resource. I don't know if college students now like see it the way that I do, but if you don't, I would look into it because it is a great way to stay connected. And I read things from people I haven't met, but I consider, someone I'd want to be like someday, sharing projects they're working on, and I'm part of an IAPA committee and I also attend TEA events, and that's an international community where there's some things that are far beyond what we might be doing in the US or vice versa. We could teach to others, but I think LinkedIn is a really great connector.
Yeah, I definitely got the whole kick in the butt from my friend in a business to start using LinkedIn and become more involved on that. Mm-hmm. So I guess the last question that I'll end on is kind of going towards that with the advice is, what do you think makes people successful in operations? Like kind of what traits do you look for on just like experience? Like if people were to go to an interview, like what speaks to you of what makes them seem like they'd be more successful?
I'd love to start with this one, if that's all right.
Do it, Crystal.
I think an inquisitive nature is pretty crucial. You have to be curious about the world around you, curious about what other people are doing. You have to be curious about pretty much everything, because everything kind of touches operations. I think you have to look for someone that, surprise, surprise, can build relationships with people, that has some really good people skills, that's able to communicate with others. I would say look for people that are really good with boundaries as well. So they understand, when they need to tell someone no, right? They understand that and have the ability to tell others no gracefully. And definitely an independent self-starter. I know that a lot of jobs will say that, but I would say operations is probably one of the few areas where you really got to motivate yourself to get the work done. It's very much, you're working with the team and you've got to do a lot of work, probably independently, but also touching on those team members. Whereas I think, build, when you're working on the build, you've got your crew, right? And when you're working on marketing, you've got your crew and your actors, you've got your cast. But I feel like operations tends to be a much smaller crew. And so you've really got to keep yourself motivated and keep all those around you motivated. Amy?
Yeah, great answer. Of course, I knew I was going to say, and then I was impressed with your answer. Okay, I know. I agree with all those things. I think, I'm thinking, because especially since we're talking to some younger people, that some experiences I would look for would be, even if you can't get paid jobs in operations, would be volunteering for events, which I know will be up and running again once the world heals. Experience talking on a radio. I'm going to say some like really specific things, but listening and talking on a radio, and but working at events, understanding how, saying like I volunteered at a concert, like my local rock concert last summer. Yeah, there's like 600 people there, and even if they can tell me about a problem that happened, like what it started raining and everyone was running and it was crazy and blah blah blah, and if they could tell me that they saw a problem, I don't necessarily. I will ask them in an interview, what do you think a better, like a solution? How could that have been prevented? You know, but I think people who see inquisitive, but also can see problems and note there needs to be a fix, because you have to take initiative in operations. You know, you can't just see something and be like, ooh, that looks bad. You have to be able to analyze it, observe it, analyze it, and adjust it, and then test it and make it better. But I think getting events experience, even any type of management experience, helps too. Even if your manager at a grocery store, you probably know how different departments work together, because that's a key part of operations.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're out of time. You guys more. Thank you so much for coming today and teaching us more about operations. It was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, TEA at USC, and thanks Midsummer Scream. Can't wait to be back in person next year.
Yay, thank you.